Welcome to the wrap-up for the hard mode ring in the YouTube Conlang relay. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check the playlist in the description. There's a playlist for the hard mode ring and the playlist for the entire thing, which is already sorted out. So, this was actually the first torch I received back at the end of a ring. This was difficult. So this is what I got. This is the torch that I got. And for some reason it opened in Notepad instead of Notepad++, but that's fine. So this is the whole torch. And the initial text was kind of short. That's kind of expected. I'm going to bring up the grammar document just so I can point to things and we can talk about things here. But this is the language. Now, the last language I was not physically capable of producing, probably. This language, I could produce this. And I'm not normally the kind of guy who says, I'm not going to try to pronounce that because I'm a linguist. I'm trained in phonetics. I should be able to pronounce anything. But the trying to finagle with like looking at all of these representations and looking up all of this, and the tones are singing the tunes of different songs, it would probably take a long time on the video, and it would take even longer for me to figure out how to record it, and probably too many takes. So this is maybe one of the very few times where I look at a foreign language or a conlang and say, I'm not going to try pronouncing it. But here is, we have the grammar document here. There are so many really like bizarre things about this language that I'm not necessarily going to go deal with here. But here's what we've got. This is the what I was sent. And you can see there's some like jokey stuff in here about like, okay, something that's spelled like die means endure. Once means habitual, right? Like that. Obviously not how it's actually pronounced. Sorta exactly, right? That's not hard. Glossing was kind of like weird because there are things that I don't understand. So I did the gloss. A few things about glossing this. There are explicit markers for no object and no indirect object. That is not natural at all, which I don't expect this to be natural, but it's very weird for a language to have a marker for there is no object. That's just not how languages work. I suppose you can have like a marker that says this verb is intransitive sometimes, like a valency changing thing, but it's usually not like this extensive that, okay, there's no object, no indirect object. There's also possible to have an no subject anti. There's like negative subject, like -1 subjects or -1 objects that you can have, which I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. So we have a lot of weird things. Another thing is everything is a verb and is fully inflected as a verb. And that makes it really hard to figure out who's doing what to who, as we say. Like, what's an agent, what's a patient, what's an experiencer. Sometimes it's difficult because like every single thing is a verb, and I can't easily map like the agreement marking. There's no there's obviously going to be no case, and the order is like, I guess the order can be a clue, but it didn't really seem to help me that much. Also, like, so rather than having a normal passive and or anti-passive, you ended up with, there's, maybe I can see it in the grammar. Every permutation of orders of subject, object, and indirect object is represented by different markers. You also had some tone Sunday that tripped me up in like decoding these. And it just ended up being a lot. It ended up being a bit overwhelming to try to interpret this. Another thing is that this is built to be an unnaturally high context language. Am I using that term right? High context. Right. Yes. Yes. This is meant to be high context, which a high context language or a high context culture is less direct and depends more on shared pragmatic assumptions. It is unnatural in a way because, like, for each line, whether the capital omega and the lowercase omega, you have to count. And I think if you have more capital omegas, you assume that Grice's maximum of quantity is broken. You assume that there is more context than is necessary. If there's more lowercase omegas, then you assume that there's less context than is necessary, which is an interesting thing. So it's not just it's a high context language, but it encodes how high context each individual statement is. The problem is, like, for most of these, we had more lowercase omegas, so I had to like assume that there's missing information. But in a normal conversation, if you violate the maximum quantity, that means you are intentionally not providing all of the information requested or all of the information that your interlocutor should expect, right? In a normal conversation, you like have physical context. You can see and hear and be in the same space as the other person, or you have some shared cultural context. I don't have any of that. So I don't know anything about these speakers. I understand they're like sentient spiders or something. So it's kind of a like, what am I supposed to do with that? Okay, I don't have enough context in this one, or I have too much context in this one. I don't know anything that will help me determine what's relevant. So anyway, that was the big challenge for this. Glossing it out after the initial weirdness of the grammar was not so difficult. Pulling some meaning out of it, I mean, I kind of got something. I don't know if it's right, but there's kind of no way with this language to actually know if it's right if you don't know other things about the situation, right? So in the end, this did not take me as long as the script ring, but it was difficult in its own way. It was, I would say, Eridanese A from the script ring was difficult in that I had a lot of things to do to try to decode it. This language, the which I'm not going to pronounce, this one was difficult because, like, I didn't know what anything meant. Like, the difficulty was I just had to give up at a point, you know? So the original text, if you will remember, it was, destroy the orb. Do not attempt to use it. Shatter it into 1,000 pieces before the enemies from the shadow can reach it. Shatter it. Shatter it. Anything else leads to ruin. And let's see what the result was. The orb rested. With difficulty, I have been forgotten to you. No one uses it. It is forgotten, or it is an enemy. It may not watch, it may not forget. The great enemy forgot. Lava is needed to be useful. In every age, there will be exactly one orb. It is absolutely useful. So that's gobbledygook. It is interesting to me that mention of the orb survived, because I don't think the other torches preserved anything that clearly. There is an orb, and there are, it seems to be, enemies or opposition. It might be that it was just fewer legs this time, which that was just a handicap that I gave this ring, because I'm dealing with hard languages. I had to give them more time to do their translations, but maybe that led to some semblance of meaning being preserved. Maybe on the stream this week, we will go through and go through all 3 of the texts and talk about how this complete whole that I created would break into 3 different directions, because that's what happened. But with the other texts, it just had nothing to do at all, right? We lost the initial information. With this one, my thought is that whoever gets this either is going to be super incredibly confused about what's going on, or they're going to see it is absolutely useful and they will do exactly the wrong thing. And that is beautiful. So anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you to all of my patrons. And that is the end of the 2026 YouTube Conlang Relay. I will see you this Saturday at 8 a.m. Central Time. And we'll see how many of these hard mode folks are around to talk about their stuff. It's it went a little crazy. But anyway, thank you and happy conlanging.